What's up, guys? UFC 314 just happened this Saturday, and I want to talk about the future of all 10 main card fighters, as some guys are in a very low point in their career and other guys are on the highest point of their career they've ever been. So I want to talk about some of their stats, their future, and where they stand in their respective divisions. I think some of these guys should retire. I think some of these guys are ready for the top of the division. It just depends on who we're talking about. So let's get right into it, starting off with the man of the hour, the guy who broke the 35 curse, Alexander Volkanovski. Don't let the stats fool you. He is 2-3 in his last 5, but look at the losses. 2 to Islam Makhachev and 1 to Ilia Topuria. Those are 2 pound-for-pound top 3 fighters in the world, and Islam's the pound-for-pound number 1. He has just beaten Diego Lopes, and before that, he had a win over Yair Rodriguez. So his only loss at featherweight, if you guys do not know, is against Ilia Topuria. So Volkanovski has a perfect record at featherweight outside of Ilia Topuria, which is crazy if you think about it. And he has officially broken the 35 curse. He's 36 years old. He is the first fighter in UFC history below the weight class of 155 pounds to win a belt past the age of 35. Fighters were a combined 0-17 leading into the fight against him versus Diego Lopes. So now 1-17. Volkanovski did it. And I knew if anybody was going to be able to do it, it would be Volkanovski. Looking at his UFC accomplishments, he's a 7-time UFC champion, 5 title defenses, broke the 35 curse, and he's a top 5 fighter of all time. Personally, in my top 10 or top 5, I have Volkanovski at number 3. I do think he's 1 win away from passing up somebody like GSP. Listen, GSP's record is going to fall eventually. He had a lot of close fights in his career, and modern day UFC is just more impressive than the past eras. I know a lot of people say you have to take it era by era. I disagree. I do think it's more impressive to dominate in today's era than it was back in GSP's era, just given that how skilled everybody is. It's harder to hold on to those belts. So in my personal opinion, I think that Alexander Volkanovski should hang it up. He's 36 years old. Let's be real. The form that we saw on Saturday was not prime Volkanovski. I do not think. He looked a little bit slower. He took a lot more damage than we normally see him take. If you look at his face after the fight, he just didn't look like he was able to move as well as he used to move. His defense looked okay, but he still got cracked. And listen, it was a very good version of Alexander Volkanovski, enough to break the 35 curse. But I do not think it's a version that should continue to fight and risk his legacy. However, if he does want to continue to fight, let's look at the possible matchups. We already know it's most likely going to be Movsar Evloev. Movsar is 9-0 in the UFC. Granted, has 0 finishes, but he's 9-0. It should have been him versus Movsar instead of him versus Lopes, but they gave it to Lopes, who is the more active fighter. But now I believe that Volkanovski said he wants to get back in there in August or September. Let's do him versus Movsar if he wants to continue to fight. And let me say, I do not think this is as easy of a matchup for Volkanovski as everybody's making it out to be. Let's keep it 100, guys. These undefeated Russian fighters, they always have that plot armor. They always find a way to win, man. This kind of reminds me of like the Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman fight. I could see a world where Movsar is kind of getting outstruck and beat by Volkanovski and just landing out of nowhere just a knockout shot and putting Volkanovski out cold to take his title. And it's crazy because Movsar doesn't have a single finish in the UFC. So to say he's going to finish Volkanovski, to a lot of people would be delusional, but it's like, man, don't get it twisted, man. Movsar is dangerous. He has a little bit of pop in his hands, and Volkanovski's chin is not what it used to be. Look at Leon Edwards. He's never been a guy who had power. Knocks out Kamaru Usman with a head kick. Anything can happen against these older fighters, because Kamaru Usman was also 37, 36 years old whenever he fought Leon Edwards. So I'm just saying it's a very risky fight, riskier than people want to imagine, but I do think that Volkanovski could defeat Movsar Evloev. You also have the Yair Rodriguez rematch, which I don't want to see. Very low chance of that happening. Yair seems to think he's in line for a title shot. Or if you want to do the superstardom path for John Silva, give him an immediate title shot, which would be criminal towards Movsar. But nonetheless, in my opinion, I'd like to see Volkanovski retire. Let's get on to the co-main, or the next fighter that lost in the main event. Diego Lopes, this is only his 2nd loss in the UFC. Crazy that this guy's had 7 fights in the UFC in under 2 years. His last 5 fights, he just lost to Volkanovski. He beat up Brian Ortega. He has a clean win over Danny Ige. It was close, but clean. Knockout over Yusuf and a knockout over Pat Sabatini. So Diego Lopes is a finisher through and through. Looking at his stats, a 5-2 UFC record. He's already a top 5 fighter at featherweight. Did it in, I believe, less than a year. 7 UFC fights in 2 years, and he's only lost to the elite of the elite. Listen, he has a loss to Volkanovski, who's the greatest featherweight and one of the greatest fighters to ever exist, and he has a loss to Movsar Evloev on short notice. That was a very close fight. you could almost argue that he won that fight, but they gave it to Mavzar. Nonetheless, I think Diego Lopes's future is bright in this featherweight division. He didn't take a whole lot of damage, but he'll probably need like 3 or 4 months off just to, get his body back to where it was. And when we're talking about the possible matchups for Diego Lopes, listen, I think it's obvious. It's probably most likely going to be Yair Rodriguez at Noche, I think in September. And Yair and Lopes, they have some beef, as you saw at the press conference. They were going back and forth, cussing each other out in Spanish. They both speak Spanish, so it's perfect for the Noche market. And yeah, this is a no-brainer. Yair versus Diego Lopes. I know Yair's calling for a title shot, but pipe down low, bro. We'll get to Yair in a second. But he ain't getting a title shot. I don't know what planet he's living on. It must be Planet Delusion, because this guy genuinely believes on a 1-fight win streak he deserves a title shot. Either way, he could do a rematch with Mavzar. Very low chance that happens. Or he could fight John Silva. Also a very low chance that happens. I think the next fight for Diego Lopes is 100% Yair. The backstory's there. The beef is there. It's a fun fight on paper. 2 dangerous strikers, and Diego Lopes, if he gets it to the ground, has, I'd say, a way better submission game than Yair. And I think he'd be able to take down Yair, as Yair has some of the worst takedown defense in that division. Nonetheless, Diego Lopes shouldn't hang his head over this loss. He's still my favorite fighter, my homie. And yeah, man, I'm excited to see who he fights next. Moving on to the co-main event, Michael Chandler got absolutely brutalized by Paddy Pimblett. But let's talk about the future of Michael Chandler, man. Let's look at his last 5 fights. Lost to Paddy Pimblett, got dominated. Lost to Charles Oliveira, got dominated. Submitted by Dustin Poirier. KOs the ghost of Tony Ferguson. And then a loss to Gaethje. Not a close fight. Gaethje clearly won that fight. So Michael Chandler, I think, is at a crossroads in his career. He's 2-5 in the UFC. 1-4 in his last 5. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. He's 39 years old. And he's taken a ton of damage. So for Iron Michael Chandler, I think that it might be time to hang up the gloves. Now, if we know Michael Chandler, he doesn't want to hang up the gloves. He's a brawler. He likes to go out. Like Dana White said, he's like the Arturo Gatti of the UFC. He's going to have an exciting fight every single time, whether it be you enjoying him getting his butt beat the entire time or he's trying to take guys' heads off. Michael Chandler is undeniably an exciting fighter. And yeah, man, he just got the crap beat out of him by Paddy Pimblett. So I think that Michael Chandler should hang it up, Like I said, 39 years old with a negative record in the UFC, double the amount of losses, 2-5. It's a tough road for Michael Chandler to do anything at this point in his career, because at almost 40 years old, it's like, what do you have left to prove? And I think that Michael Chandler came to the UFC too late. And I also believe that Michael Chandler was never truly an elite fighter. He just lacks fight IQ and lacks a lot of skills. He doesn't really have a jiu-jitsu game, and you don't really see good fight IQ moments out of Michael Chandler. But if we're talking about the possible matchups next up for Michael Chandler, I think that the most likely option, believe it or not, is going to be Dan Hooker. Not because I agree that Michael Chandler deserves to fight up the rankings once again, but we already know Daddy Dana loves him some Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler's got some of the most Dana White privilege. So the reason I think Dan Hooker's the most likely next matchup is because the UFC loves Michael Chandler. They're going to be like, it's okay, Mike. You're 2-5 in the UFC, but we'll give you another top 10 ranked opponent because, you're an exciting fighter. They could put him up against an up-and-comer like Grant Dawson or Ignacio Bahamondes. Those are always a good possibility as well. I personally think it's time for Michael Chandler to sink or swim. If he wants to continue fighting, he needs to fight these up-and-comers like Grant Dawson, like Ignacio, like a Ferreziam. He needs to fight these guys coming up in the lightweight division like Poirier did against Benoit Saint-Denis. I know he just fought Paddy Pimblett, but that ain't enough, little bro. You've had top fight after top fight, and you failed over and over. So it's time for Michael Chandler to defend or get out. And yeah, these are the possible matchups. I think they're probably going to give him the Dan Hooker fight because, like I said, Dana White and the UFC just love them some Michael Chandler. Paddy Pimblett defeated Michael Chandler in the co-main event, proved a lot of people wrong, and I think he got rid of that fraud status off of his head. A lot of people thought that Paddy Pimblett was an absolute fraud, and people still think he's a fraud after this fight. They're saying Paddy Pimblett has only beat old, washed-up fighters, which, is somewhat of a fair take. Chandler's 38, nearly 39. Bobby Green was 38. Tony Ferguson was 40. Jared Gordon was 34. Jordan Levitt is the only fighter, I believe, in the last 2 years, 3 years that Paddy Pimblett's beat that isn't above the age of 36, 37. So yeah, I agree. It's time for Paddy Pimblett to face guys that are younger and in their prime. I don't want to see Paddy Pimblett against no more washed-up fighters. He's now 7-0 in the UFC, and he's going to be ranked either 7 or 8, taking Michael Chandler's ranking. So listen, for Paddy Pimblett, this is it, man. No more easy matchups. And as I say that, look at the possible matchups. I already have Justin Gaethje at 70%. I do think they're going to give Paddy Pimblett another old head and Justin Gaethje another freebie win for Paddy Pimblett. Because let's be real, Justin Gaethje The second it hits the mat with Paddy Pimblett, he's going to be a fish out of water. He's going to just be like Chandler. Paddy's going to get on his back, and he's either going to lock up a rear naked choke, or he's going to pummel Justin Gaethje into a submission. So either way, I do think that Paddy Pimblett beats Justin Gaethje. And yeah, I think this might be the only winnable fight for Paddy Pimblett in the top 5. I think he loses to Poirier. I think he loses to Oliveira. I think he loses to Arman. I think he loses to Ilya. I think he loses to all those guys. But he 100% beats Justin Gaethje, in my opinion. Gaethje's just a white belt on the mat, man. And we've seen in Paddy's fights, he finds a way to get it to the ground in just about every single fight. And Justin Gaethje will be no exception. Listen, if Rafael Fiziev is getting Justin Gaethje to the ground, there's no doubt in my mind Paddy's getting him to the ground. So yeah, in my opinion, they're probably going to do the Gaethje fight next, because you know that the UFC is trying to give Paddy the easiest path to the title. And what better way to do that is by throwing him an easy fight in Justin Gaethje. But he did call out Charles Oliveira. That's a likely matchup, although I do think they're going to do Ilya versus Charles for International Fight Week. And there's also Dan Hooker, who would be another easy matchup for Paddy. So nonetheless, I think Paddy proved that he is somewhat elite. He's not just a bum or a can that's going to lose to any top guy. It was Michael Chandler, and I can concede that he is fighting nothing but a bunch of old heads. It's time for Paddy Pimblett to face guys that are in their prime and not in wheelchairs. So I'm excited to see what's next. Moving on to the feature fight in the UFC 314 card, we had Yair Rodriguez, who I need to rip into Yair a little bit. He's calling for a title shot. Let's look at his last 5 fights. He's had 1 win in the past 2 years, and that's against Pitbull. Lost to Brian Ortega, got submitted, got TKO'd and destroyed by Volkanovski. Before that, he submitted Emmett to win the interim title, and then he beat Ortega by a kind of a fluky submission, but got it done. Kind of injured his arm, and that was it. And he's saying he deserves a title shot. He's saying he doesn't want to see anything but the title. But come on, brother, you beat Pitbull. Listen, Pitbull is 37 years old. We'll get to Pitbull in a second, but he's 37 years old, bro. He's a Bellator reject, and you beat him, and you couldn't even finish him, but you won a title shot? Come on, bro. Yair Rodriguez needs like 2 more wins for a title shot. He needs to... These fighters, man, they're so entitled. A guy like Yair, who has 1 win against a guy who is debuting in the UFC, thinks that he deserves a title shot over Mavzar. I'll never understand the mindset of these UFC fighters. Yair is one of the most entitled fighters in the UFC. He's like the definition of like cry about it, don't earn it. So possible matchups, let's be real, he ain't getting a title shot. They're going to do him versus Diego Lopes for Noche in September, and that's perfect, man. Like I said, there's beef there. There's a backstory. They could do him versus John Silva. John Silva did call out Yair Rodriguez for a matchup, so the UFC might want to skyrocket John Silva, although I do not think Yair would take that fight. Yair's already been pulled from the rankings a long time ago for refusing to fight Zabit, I think, back in the day. So the UFC have had to pull this guy from the rankings, so I do not think there's a chance he's going to fight John Silva just because he is entitled and he refuses to fight down the rankings. And they could do the Volkanovski rematch, which, dude, I hate it. I hate it. I don't think Volkanovski cares about this fight. He's already got a win over Yair. A second win literally does about little to nothing for his legacy. So for me, it's Yair versus Lopes. This is the next fight to make. And listen, if Yair beats Lopes, I still don't think he deserves a title shot. This guy needs 2 more wins. He needs to stop, like, crying about a title shot and actually win some fights against a guy who's not a Bellator reject. And speaking of Bellator rejects, let's get on to Pitbull. Listen, man. Just like Chandler, it might be time for Pitbull to hang it up. He's almost 38 years old. His last 5 fights, he's 2-3 in his last 5. And he has 2 losses to guys outside of the UFC. He's losing to Sergio Pettis. He's losing to Suzuki, and he's winning against guys that are Herbst and Kennedy. Like, Jeremy Kennedy's terrible, bro. And that's your last win? I'm sorry, man, but Pitbull coming to the UFC at 37 years old, he just kind of stood there in front of Yair and got beat up and didn't really do anything. He fought, let's be real, Pitbull fought like a chihuahua this weekend. That's just the reality of the situation. He's 1-3 in his last 4. He's almost 38 years old. He's got a ton of miles. He's got 44 MMA fights. The only thing I think there's there for Pitbull is him to stick around for fun fights. He said he would be UFC champion within a year. Now that he's lost his debut, it ain't going to happen. So it looks like Pitbull is going to be thrown to the wolves in fun fights. And I would not be surprised if the UFC gave him Brian Ortega, which would still be in the top 6 of the rankings. Because let's be real, UFC seem to love these former Bellator fighters, Michael Chandler, now Pitbull. I could 100% see a world where, like, it's okay, Pitbull. You lost versus Yair in the top 5. We'll give you the next fighter down in Brian Ortega at number 6. They also could do him versus Bryce Mitchell or him versus Calvin Kattar if they want to give him a free win. Him versus Calvin Kattar. I actually think him versus Bryce Mitchell would be a very competitive matchup, and I'd love to see if they went to the ground because they both have really good BJJ. But nonetheless, I think that Pitbull should probably hang it up. He's probably not going to hang it up, though. Let's be real. He just signed with the UFC. He's probably looking to make a lot of money with the UFC. So yeah, I'm excited to see what's next for Pitbull, although I do think he should hang up the gloves. Moving on to the next fight on the card, Bryce Mitchell versus John Silva. Bryce Mitchell gets submitted for the second time in the UFC, and you know, as much as I did think Bryce Mitchell was going to lose this fight, and as much how stupid he is for the stuff he says outside the octagon, I do kind of feel bad for him, seeing him like on the ground out cold after the fight. And he got roasted by a lot of the fans for what he said. Even Dave Portnoy was roasting him for losing in front of Trump because he said he loves Trump and got choked out right in front of him. But nonetheless, Bryce's last fight, he got submitted by Silva. He TKO'd Crone Gracie. He got knocked out cold by Emmett. He has a decision win over Ige, and then he got submitted by Taboria. So if you guys noticed throughout Bryce's career, he's not really an active fighter. You know, he's been in the UFC, I think, for 5 or 6 years now, and he only has 10 fights. So not the most active fighter in the world. He has a 7-3 UFC record. He's ranked in the top 15. So he's not the worst fighter. He's a decent fighter. The issue with Bryce Mitchell I see is that he doesn't have a lot of raw strength, and he's very slow. If you guys ever watch Bryce Mitchell, he's not the fastest fighter, and he doesn't have a lot of strength. So I think that definitely goes against him. And you got to ask, is Bryce Mitchell focused? You know, he's got the podcast backlash. He's got a lot of weight on his shoulders. He's saying a lot of things that are insane to a lot of people in the media. A lot of people think he's crazy in the head. And there's a lot on Bryce Mitchell's shoulders is all I'm saying. He's got the president of the UFC that pretty much hates him and wanted to see him get knocked out. So he was riding the weight of the world in this fight. And I'm sure he had a lot of pressure on him. And yeah, man, he ended up getting submitted by John Silva. Possible matchups, I think the most likely thing next for Bryce Mitchell is going to be a Doo Ho Choi matchup. Doo Ho Choi destroyed Nate the Train, and let's be real, Doo Ho Choi is not the most active fighter in the world, so he probably would be willing to wait for Bryce Mitchell whenever he's ready. He called Bryce Mitchell out after he beat Nate the Train, saying he was going to show him how flat the earth is. They could also do Bryce Mitchell as Aaron Pico's debut, or they could do Bryce Mitchell versus Patricio Pitbull, as I mentioned before. Nonetheless, I still don't think this means that Bryce Mitchell is a can. Listen, he's only lost to the best of the best. He's lost to Emmett by a knockout. He lost to John Silva, who's an insane up-and-comer. And he lost to Ilia Topuria, who's a champion. So it's not like Bryce Mitchell's losing the cans. You know, he's losing to elite fighters. But it's tough, man. How much longer can Bryce go if the pressure is on his shoulders? You know, we are going to have to wait and see. And the guy that finished Bryce Mitchell is now 5-0 in the UFC, all finishes. John Silva burst onto the scene, I think, at the end of 2023 in the UFC. And this guy has wins over Bryce Mitchell, Melsik Bagdasaryan, Drew Dober, Charles Jourdain, which were a week apart, and Weston Wilson, which it's Weston Wilson. But nonetheless, I think John Silva at this point has proved that he's the most dangerous featherweight. And I really, truly believe that. This guy can finish anybody on any given night. He has some of the most dangerous striking. He can knock anybody out. And now he's proved that he can submit people, because submitting Bryce Mitchell is no easy feat. This guy went out there, and where a lot of people, as myself, thought he would get like a TKO finish, no, he pretty much gassed out Bryce Mitchell and ended up submitting him in the second round, putting him out cold with a ninja choke. And yeah, I think it's safe to say that John Silva is the most dangerous featherweight. As far as who he's going to face next, I have him versus Yair Rodriguez or Lerone Murphy next. I don't think he's going to be Yair, so I probably should have put Lerone Murphy as a higher percentage. It's probably going to be a guy like Lerone Murphy. I don't think they're going to give John Silva a jump up all the way to the top 5 straight from Bryce Mitchell, but the UFC is always looking to build stars, so it would not be the most surprising thing in the world. But for me, I personally think that John Silva should fight Lerone Murphy next, and I think he would beat the brakes off of Lerone Murphy. Lerone Murphy is just not impressive, man. He has okay striking, but outside of that, it's like, what does Lerone Murphy do? Pitter-pat to decisions? John Silva's going to go out there and beat this guy and knock him out, in my opinion. So, or they could do him versus Alexander Volkanovski, which would be a complete disrespect to Movsar Evloev and arguably some other guys in the division. But, you know, the UFC is in the entertainment business, so it would not be the most surprising thing in the world if they were to give John Silva a title shot. But I think that him versus Lerone Murphy is most likely going to be the next matchup. Next up, Dominick Reyes knocked out Nikita Krylov brutally this weekend, and man, was I wrong. I thought that Dominick Reyes' chin has still not been tested, and that Nikita Krylov would come in there all guns blazing and catch him on the chin and put him out. But you can argue that Dominick Reyes' chin has still not been tested, because I don't think he got hit in his last 3 fights clean at all. But nonetheless, Dominick Reyes is back, man. He's on a 3-fight win streak after going on a 4-fight skid with 3 knockout losses in a row. Now he's knocked out Krylov, Anthony Smith, and Dustin Jacoby back to back to back. And man, Dominick Reyes just might have the best left hook in the game. Yes, even better than Alex Pereira. Probably not, but they're pretty dang close. Go watch that pullback counter he hit against Nikita Krylov this weekend. It was a thing of beauty. And for Nikita Krylov, what were you doing charging in like an absolute moron? like Dominick Reyes isn't one of the most dangerous punchers. But nonetheless, Dominick Reyes is on a resurgent right now, man. 3-0 run, all KOs. And is this the title run of Dominick Reyes? Can you imagine a world where Dominick Reyes, right, goes out there after losing 4 fights in a row, getting finished brutally 3 times in a row, comes back on to knock out everybody en route to the title, and then call out John Jones? Can you imagine a world like that? That'd be the most insane full circle moment in UFC history, because we already know that this guy has a win over John Jones. The judges just gave John Jones a Christmas gift by gifting him the decision. As far as his next possible matchups, listen, I think they're probably going to do him versus Rakic. Rakic is ranked number 6, I believe, on a 3-fight losing streak. So it's time for Rakic to fight down the rankings. He's been fighting up and losing over and over. And I think him versus Dominick Reyes is a great fight. I don't think they ever have fought. They also could do the rematch versus Jan Blachowicz. I think that Dominick Reyes called out Jan Blachowicz. We'll see. I think it's either going to be Rakic or Blachowicz. There's a 5% chance. I think he also called out Yuri. Maybe he called out Yuri and not Blachowicz. He called out Yuri for a rematch. Let's be real. Yuri only wants to fight if it's getting him to the belt. I don't think he wants to fight all the way down to number 8 in the rankings in Dominick Reyes. So I personally think it's going to be Rakic or Blachowicz. I think it should be Rakic. And if Dominick Reyes beats Rakic, man, listen, he's right there next to the top 5. And he might even be looking for a title eliminator after that. So I am very impressed with Dominick Reyes. There's not too many guys that get knocked out 3 times in a row and then come back to go on the run of their own. So couldn't happen to a better guy. Shout out to Dominick Reyes. And the last fighter that fought on the main card, Nikita Krylov, took 2 years off, came back to face Dominick Reyes, and he got absolutely slumped this past weekend. And yeah, man, Nikita Krylov showing that if you take 2 years off and you charge forward like an absolute tard, you will get chinned by Dominick Reyes. What was he thinking? Charging forward like Fabricio Verdum did against Stipe Miocic. It's definitely ill-advised. So for Nikita Krylov, it's a tough one, man. He now has an 11-8 record in the UFC. He does have 9 finishes, and he's still ranked top 10, but this might drop him right outside the top 10. A brutal KO loss, and he's not the most active guy. He was just off for 2 years. He had a 3-fight win streak coming into the fight. I did think he was going to be able to chin Reyes, but he just couldn't get it done, man. So I don't know where we go from here for Nikita Krylov. I personally think that the biggest matchup they're probably going to put him against is Zhang Mingyang. The UFC is always looking to build the China market. Let's be real, Zhang Mingyang is going to beat the brakes off of Anthony Smith, and I could see the UFC doing Zhang Mingyang versus Nikita Krylov maybe at like the end of this year, on like the November or December card after Zhang Mingyang retires Anthony Smith. They could do him versus Azamat Murzakanov. I don't know how long Azamat's suspended due to his Pharaoh test, or they could do a rematch with Johnny Walker, but as I said, I think it's going to be Zhang Mingyang after he puts that work on Anthony Smith. That's what I think the future of these UFC fighters look like, guys. All 10 of these fighters fought this weekend, and some of them are looking down, some of them are looking up. I'm excited to see what their futures look like. Drop a like on the video if you guys enjoy these kind of videos. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Thank you guys for watching. Unk is out.